The next session where we will be hearing from wireless industry CEOs in a roundtable about the business and policy issues that are confronting our competitive carriers. And as they set the stage here, let me sort of introduce our moderator on the fly here, Maggie Reardon, who is a senior writer for CNET CBS Interactive. Maggie has covered the telecom beat for more than a decade. Since 2003, she has served as the senior writer for CNET News, covering all things wireless and broadband and launch of the latest iPhone and speculation of new devices and major telephone company, wireless company mergers, you name it, spectrum policy, she's covered it. She frequently appears as an expert on major news networks, and her Ask Maggie column shares advice and insight twice a week on data plans, smartphones, and speculation on the wireless industry. So it's great to have Maggie here, and I will see, where is Maggie? All right, here we go. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maggie Reardon. And then Maggie will introduce the panel as we get set. Okay, and if the panel would like to come on up right now, we're real efficient today. We got this thing turned around. Maggie, thank you.
Yeah,
Good to see
thank you.
Thanks for coming. Okay, I think we got a couple of our panelists moseying on up here. We have a couple more here. I'm going to turn it all over to Maggie and get out of your way. Let Mr. Ron Smith do some talking here.
No.
Okay, so why don't you all just come up and I'll let you briefly introduce yourselves.
Get a couple of waters.
Probably do a better job at
Oh, there she's got it.
telling everybody a little bit about your company. Okay, great. So,
Craven Shumaker. I'm the CEO of iWireless. I've been with the company since last July. I have about a 20-year background and 20-plus year background at Sprint and Nextel before I got to iWireless. iWireless is a joint venture between T-Mobile and Iowa Network Services, which is a consortium of 120 local independent telephone company. We own and operate all of the Iowa markets and have a GSM HBA Plus network, 4G network in all the state of Iowa.
okay, go ahead.
My name is Ron Smith. I'm the president and CEO of Bluegrass Cellular. We pretty much offer service between Louisville, Nashville, and Central Kentucky. It's pretty much who we are. We're an initial startup off of the initial wireless carriers. 1991 was when we brought our first network up, and we're currently a CDMA provider as well as an LTE provider. We're partner with Verizon Wireless and their 4G LTE in Rural America partnership, and also have services that we'll be offering in other parts of the state.
Good morning. I'm Jim Hyde, President and CEO of nTelos Wireless. We operate primarily in Virginia and West Virginia, 6 million covered POPs. We operate under a retail wholesale model where we've got a vibrant retail business across the whole of our footprint. We're also the exclusive network provider to Sprint across West Virginia and portions of Western Virginia.
And I'm Michael Pryor. I'm the CEO of Atlantic Tele-Network. We're a public holding company with assets, wireless and wireline assets in the U.S. and internationally, mostly in the Caribbean.
Okay. Now, all of you are partnered with bigger carriers, bigger nationwide carriers. But, you know, I'm just, you know, the majority of consumers in the U.S. have a nationwide carrier as their provider. So what are the challenges that you face as smaller players competing against them? I guess in some cases you compete against them, some cases you partner with them. I don't know, Ron, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. I think, you know, the first thing we have to understand is that we really, while we're regional carriers, we have to offer nationwide services. And so the reason for us for partnering with Verizon Wireless was primarily so we saw that as the fastest way that we could provide 4G nationwide services to our customers. going forward. So we pretty much, about 3 years ago, took a two-pronged strategy. One was to partner with Verizon, get the latest and greatest devices that we could, make sure that we could provide our customers a transition from 3G to 4G. But we also recognize that we have spectrum that we've purchased under the 700 megahertz auctions. We have a mandate to build out that while it's been extended toward the end of this year, we recognize we also wanted to have operational control over our LTE network and to be able to go into new markets. So we've actually gone down a second route, and we're announcing today actually that we've brought up our second 700 or our second LTE network under a 700 megahertz band class 12, and initially we'll be offering wireless internet. But it's our first step toward being able to provide another opportunity for partnership with our customers and expand into new markets and new revenue streams. So to compete as a regional carrier, you have to be providing those nationwide services, but also looking how do you provide those local services that can be competitive and revenue producing as well.
Craven, how do you see the challenges? I mean,
we're a little
partly
unique.
owned by
We're
T-Mobile.
a little unique. We use their nationwide network, and we're their network in Iowa. We follow their path. You know, the big challenges we have is to make sure we follow get the handsets built that we need for our network as well as theirs. That they take the lead there. So we know it's important to have an unlimited 4G experience if we can nationwide. That's our strength of our partnership. That's what we do. We are very cognizant on the quality of service we offer in Iowa. We really believe that can be a key differentiator since we are local. I think that there is an opportunity for a carrier, if you have broad enough assets, to be the local carrier and also have a big national footprint at the same time. So our partnership, we're fortunate to have it, and we're trying to leverage it as much as we can.
Is marketing an issue when you're going up against the big guys?
Yeah, for sure. It's one of the interesting things we found is if you operate in very rural areas and you look at advertising, the advertising is sold usually based on the DMA, and it's typically based on a metropolitan.
What's a DMA?
Does anyone know something marketing? I've forgotten what it stands for.
You can just explain what it is.
Right, DMA.
Yeah.
We stick with acronyms in this business.
Okay.
But the important part is you're buying to advertise on television, which is still very effective. You have to buy based on a footprint often that is well beyond what you're serving. And you know, some of the carriers here face that in bigger ways and some in lesser, but it's an impact, and just the brand recognition the larger carriers get throughout is something you have to combat. But a lot of the operators here have been in there operating their areas for so long. They do have brand recognition, so that's not the fundamental problem. It's getting out your offerings and keeping it fresh on a cost-effective way.
Right. And Jim, I guess. And Ron sort of touched upon this too. I mean, you're regional carriers, but your customers aren't regional. You know, they go all over the place. They roam all over the place. So, you know, has that been difficult? I mean, I guess you guys are linked up with Sprint.
Well, I think it's important to offer nationwide access to networks for your customers. And so one of the biggest challenges we have right now as we sort of enter the new age of high levels of data consumptions and connectivity, you know, sort of all of the time. Maggie, I saw you posting your article over there while we were sitting, you know, at the table, so nice job with that. But I mean, so the demand and the desire to be connected all the time is extremely important. So one of the challenges, obviously, we face is access to networks for data roaming at competitive prices. So I think that's key. Certainly, we don't enjoy the same economies of scale as some of the larger competitors, but since I've been in this business, there's a couple of things customers just absolutely positively won't compromise on, and that's devices and network access. You know, so we're perfectly fine and able to compete against our larger competitors and use our smaller size to our advantage. We can be more nimble. We can offer a nice value proposition. We can develop brand recognition, but without access to devices, without access to spectrum that we can continue to roll out and expand and enhance our networks, and without access to networks nationwide for our customers to meet those customer demands, it's very, very difficult.
Okay. Well, that leads into my next sort of topic here about, you know, CCA is basically an organization that you all come to help get things done in Washington. And I'm just wondering, you know, do you feel that you're at a disadvantage in Washington because you're a smaller carrier? And, you know, what can be done sort of at the policy level to help you all compete? You know, who wants, it's a toss-up. Who wants that one?
Look, I think Steve and all the folks at the CCA are doing a fantastic job. I'm delighted with the developments over the last couple of years, and I would say that with the growth of the association in and of itself, and some of the larger regional carriers and the 2 smaller national carriers joining the association has certainly helped get the attention of the policymakers, you know, on Capitol Hill. But you know, I don't think we can discount the value add that we've had with the people inside CCA and the hard work that they've done.
And Michael, actually, maybe you could speak to this, or Ron. You know, how do you feel that having Sprint and T-Mobile being part of this organization has it helped you guys in your fight in Washington to be heard?
Well, I think for sure. I think there's no doubt. I mean, Washington, a lot of it's a numbers game. I think that as Jim said, I think CCA has been very effective, and you do get a hearing with members of Congress, people on the Hill, the FCC, as a smaller carrier. But as you add to the mass, as you're more present and there's more behind you, it definitely packs a punch. And so T-Mobile and Sprint quite clearly bring a lot of capacity, and I think have helped CCA raise its profile.
Okay. Now I know we've got this big incentive auction that's coming up, the 600 megahertz auction, and I know there were a lot of regional carriers who participated in the 700 megahertz auction. I'm just wondering, how important is this auction to regional carriers? I know, for example, T-Mobile really needs this spectrum. Sprint, I don't know if they've said, I mean, I think they want to participate as well, but those 2 big companies did not participate in the 700 megahertz auction. So I'm curious, smaller carriers, is this an important piece of spectrum that you guys want? And
it's extraordinarily important. 600 megahertz in a rural environment, just like 700 megahertz, with its propagation capabilities, is beachfront property. It's important for us to be able to provide services in an economical way, and 600, 700 megahertz is the way to do that. I think the challenges we have in working toward the next auction is a recognition that there needs to be a healthy, balanced carrier community that includes tier 1s, tier 2s, and tier 3s. And so when we start looking at the rules, a critical element of that is a recognition that under the 700 megahertz auctions, there weren't incentives for interoperability, and there have to be those built into the auction rules. There have to be ways of making sure that as spectrum is allocated, that proprietary band classes can't be developed at the end of the day. And from an economic standpoint for the tier 3s who really offer the services in the rural community, making sure we have the opportunity in terms of the geographic build out of the licenses to be able to bite into that. A lot of discussions that we've had recently are about having the auction at the EA level, which is an example for me would mean that I would have to buy Louisville, Lexington, and Nashville EAs to offer my rural area. Now, I don't care about offering or serving Louisville, Lexington, and Nashville, but I would have to buy 3 EAs to be able to offer, to be able to acquire that 600 megahertz services. So CMA level bidding has to be incorporated into the mix. There has to be a balance for all the ecosystem, and I think it's important as we look at those rules that we're making sure that we're positioning ourselves for all the carriers, just not the tier 1s, tier 2s.
How concerned are you all that the 2 bigger carriers are going to gobble up everything?
Well, I think that the Justice Department release recently, and I think the FCC in the past have certainly signaled that they're aware of the issue. I mean, that spectrum are table stakes. And I think they've certainly heard a lot from CCA about interoperability, so I think they're thinking about it beyond just the acquisition of the spectrum. But you know, it's simple. The larger carriers also have continually added and needed spectrum, right? They have more customers. They have a lot of machine to machine, so it has value to them. Right. They will look to acquire it. They know it has value, and they have you know, they have the wherewithal to buy it in cases where they don't have an immediate need. So I think those are the economic realities, and then of course they have to balance you know, what kind of proceeds they're trying to raise. So they have to balance that against the competitiveness. But I don't think there's any doubt that the people in Washington know the issue. It's what they'll do.
Well, it's interesting because, you know, Dan Hesse brought up the fact that there's another proceeding going on, you know, looking at the spectrum screen. Do we need to monkey with the spectrum screen to make sure that, you know, is below 1 gigahertz spectrum going to be weighted more heavily than upper spectrum? And, you know, but I think if you do that, you might exclude Verizon and AT&T, or that's their fear. And is that a good thing for you guys, or is that a bad thing if they don't participate at all?
I don't know if total exclusion is necessarily a good thing, but we need to set limitations for sure, because we need an ecosystem to, you know, evolve around the band classes and the frequencies that we're talking about here. So I think that's important. But look, I'm cautiously optimistic that we've got an opportunity here to get it right this time. And as Michael suggests, the folks on the Hill understand the issues, and we certainly have an opportunity to get it right.
Yeah, okay. Sort of keeping with this theme of Washington, you know, we have a new FCC chairman that should be coming on at some point. You know, the old one's going to be leaving. We don't know when yet. I'm just curious, when you look back over the last 4 years that he's been there, has he been good for the competitive carriers? Or, you know, would you give him like an A+, or is he getting more of like a D- on how he's done in terms of policies and promoting competition? I don't know, Craven, I don't know if you want to.
I'm probably a little new on rating him, but I would, you know, just looking from, and talking to Steve and some other people, I think he's probably a B+ for us, or a B. I don't know that he's done everything that we want or need. There's still interoperability in 700 is still a big issue. And I don't have 700, but I'm sure if I did, I'd probably rate him a D. Ron probably would. There's probably some decisions that could have been made that weren't made. And that's probably one of the more important things is, you know, handset standards, interoperability between band classes. Steve's list is dead on, spot on. Those are the issues that all of us will have going forward. I appreciate Dan saying he wants to be our, you know, roaming partner, have the ability for that. That's great. Hopefully he can help make sure that there's interoperability in all the handsets that he gets developed over the next few years, because that's critical to us. And you want your devices, as Steve said, you want your devices to be able to work everywhere you go, and that's very important. And interoperability between networks is probably one of the #1 goals that we need to have.
Yeah. Anybody else here, you know, a Janikowski fan? Not a Janikowski fan?
Well, the Cardinals were allowed to vote anonymously for the Pope, so I think I think we should be allowed.
But I'm not sure it's about Janikowski. I think it's about public policy that the commissions over time have developed, and then subsequent commissions have had to respond to. The Janikowski Commission has had to deal with the destructive forces that occurred from the 700 megahertz auction from the prior commission. And the issues that we've had at CCA, whether it be data roaming or interoperability, handset exclusivity, have all flown out of extremely bad policy under the 700 megahertz auction in 2008. Mm-hmm. And so any commission is going to have a difficult time trying to regroup back and say, okay, what's competition? When you start out with a commission that defines competition as 2 healthy carriers, and you try to redefine it as more than that, then you're backtracking from public policy that was set, you know, years ago. And so the commissions, any commissions, are going to be challenged.
Okay, okay. Now, getting into this issue of interoperability and, you know, LTE, if you look, because everybody's using different bands and different spectrum, it seems like it's a big mess. Dan mentioned that he has an interoperability agreement with C Spire today, which is great. Are we going to see more of that in the industry, or and how important is that for you all, for your survival, in terms of, it seems to me like it must be pretty important, right? I mean, LTE is the way things are going.
It's extraordinarily important. You know, I mean, back when it was all about voice and text, it wasn't nearly as important. But, you know, anybody who spends any time on airplanes, the first thing people do when we land is we connect almost immediately. Look around, everybody's, you know, I don't Facebook, but apparently everybody else does. But, you know, they're right on their Facebook page the second they land. So this demand for data, this craving for connectivity all of the time, everywhere you are, obliges us all to figure out a way to make it all work.
How do we get there, though? Because clearly AT&T is sort of segmented in its own place, and I know, I'm sure people here are well aware of that issue with the lower 700. You've got Verizon, which has its own band, basically, in 700. I mean, how are you all going to be able to interoperate? Is Sprint the key, then, for you all? T-Mobile?
Go ahead, Ron.
Well, I would say Sprint's actions are very positive. We, as an industry, need to have tier ones that are open to open partnership on a roaming environment. This industry for 25 years was an innovative, creative, growing industry because you had both competition and interdependence between carriers. Roaming relationships drove a lot of competition, and having small carriers out there nipping at the heels from a marketing standpoint, I think that was the phrase used yesterday, forced tier one sometimes to be much more focused on customers and providing services where they normally wouldn't because we were there. The moment you start having roaming relationships, a lot of this interoperability can fall into place, because then you start looking at an ecosystem that says, okay, these are the band classes that we're using for roaming. Then the OEM can start working toward developing devices under those band classes, and a lot of it starts to fall back in place. So it's a critical tipping point back in the direction of competitiveness.
Is Sprint big enough? Is that a big enough ecosystem for you all to tap into at this point?
I would say yes.
Yeah. Michael, what do you think?
Well, I would say it makes a difference. I think that the big two still matter, particularly because at the moment they have a bigger spread in other rural areas. But for a lot of the rest of the country, Sprint certainly makes a very big difference. But fundamentally, I mean, if you think about it, if you think about what role a regulator should have, and you think about you know, businesses, most of us are no different than any other business people in that you'd rather have just enough regulation and not too much. But one area of regulation just seems fundamental is standards and interoperability. I mean, you know, in the old days of the landline, you couldn't have somebody set up a different network technology in Maine so that if you're calling from Kentucky, you can't interconnect when you try to call someone in Maine. They never would have allowed that. And
some of this, though, I think is technical, right? I mean, the reason why you don't have interoperability between Verizon and really anybody else is because that's the way the physics of the spectrum.
That's the way Verizon wants it.
No.
It's not the physics of the spectrum. I mean, certainly there's a limited number of band classes out there that we need to solve for. Just like there's a limited amount of real estate on the devices that 100% of our customer base is carrying. So no, it's not a technology that can't be solved for. It can absolutely be solved for. And I absolutely agree with Michael. I don't necessarily, I'm going to shy away from ever asking a regulator to dictate pricing and rates or anything like that. Let us work that out ourselves. But standards are key.
Okay. Something that I was hoping that Dan would talk about today, and of course he didn't, is he's got 2 companies that want to buy them. And I know it's a sensitive topic here, but I'm just curious from your standpoint of, if you're looking to Sprint to be a roaming partner, which dance partner for them offers a better opportunity for you all, maybe in terms of handset availability or interoperability? I've talked to some people who know a lot about spectrum, and they say, well, this Dish Sprint thing sounds like a pretty good idea. They're going to get bigger channels, a lot more spectrum, possibly wider coverage, wider footprint. SoftBank's in Japan. Who cares? What do you all think?
Well, I would say that it's encouraging that there's that interest in Sprint. Actually, I think that's valuable. That's the most important takeaway for a lot of the regional carriers, because that seems to suggest that as Sprint helping to drive some of these things like interoperability will be around and will be, even have more momentum. And it's a sign that they have some momentum, that they're looked at that way. And I think it's apples and oranges, really. I mean, I think SoftBank brings an experience coming in as a challenger to the top two, where they were very successful, very aggressive and innovative business people with a very strong balance sheet. So I think that strong balance sheet, that's very important. Dish also has a great success of being a challenger and going against accepted wisdom and succeeding. And
when you look at handsets, for example,
Yeah.
SoftBank has a business in Japan. Does that potentially make the ecosystem bigger for you all to tap into when you want to be, get handsets or be roaming partners? Or
Yeah, potentially, but I mean, look, I mean, some of my best friends are still at T-Mobile from back in the day, and we sort of thought that would automatically happen with the Deutsche Telekom merger all those many years ago, and frankly, that was slow to develop. So I don't think that's an automatic. I don't think that's a slam dunk or automatic. I look at these two potential deals as two it is apples and oranges, and they both got their strengths, and I think they both got their weaknesses. Whether you look at the capital structure and what the balance sheet of these the combined companies look like post a transaction versus a transformational deal that really maybe allows new revenue streams to be created in wireless with the combination, with Dish.
so it's a win-win for regional carriers, either way it goes.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a win-win, for us either way it goes. Sprint, we love Sprint more than I can possibly explain here. I don't want to say more than I love my kids, but it's close. Having said that, though, we do think a stronger, more competitive, more vibrant Sprint is good for us and good for the industry.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. And another thing that's been in the news is T-Mobile's new service plans. And, no contract, no device subsidies. Tell me a little bit about, I'm not as familiar with all of your plans, and I'm sure everybody here in the audience doesn't know exactly what you each do. So you kind of want to go down the line and tell me, do you have subsidies now for devices, contracts? And then we'll talk about whether you think it's a good idea or not.
We do. We have contracts. We have a no contract business as well. I think it's pretty innovative what they're doing. We're looking at it very seriously. And I think I believe it will take just one other carrier to jump on, and it will possibly become, at least at the smartphone, high-end smartphone level, a way to go.
When you say one other carrier, like one other
somebody
tier
big
one?
Yeah,
Wow.
someone else. Someone else follows. I think there's a good chance that more will. There's an upfront capital issue that you've got to do. And the modeling we've looked at, it starts to look good, 8 to 10 months. So I think it's innovative. I think it's different. T-Mobile is trying to be a challenger brand. I think that is a good spot to take. I came from Nextel. That's what I viewed us as, and it's a good position. With one thing that everyone, I appreciate Jim loving Sprint, but a bigger Sprint pushes you more to triopoly possibly, and that's worrisome to me. And just as long as there's fair, competitive, in the business, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
But we're looking at it. We think that it can be a difference maker in Iowa.
Okay, Ron?
We have subsidies, we have contracts, we have non-contracts, we have non-subsidies. We offer a full basket of options for our customers. I think as you look at what T-Mobile has offered, it is very creative. And the question is how it will be received in the marketplace. It's all about the customer. And while it's not a contract, if I read it correctly, you're looking at an equipment install plan that in essence you pay for a device over time. So
But don't you already, this is the thing that sort of kills me. I keep seeing these stories that, oh God, people are going to have to pay for their phones. Like magically you get them for free. That you guys just like to give them away. You don't. Isn't that bundled into the price of your service every month? but I don't know how much of that is going toward paying for my phone.
Well, but what my point was, it depends upon the customer's economic position, the demographics. You know, T-Mobile, I think appropriately has focused on a certain market segment that this makes a lot of sense for. And there are going to be other market segments that are going to much rather have a subsidy. So I believe that we should be very creative in what our offerings are, and certainly we look at all possibilities and the way we can try and meet multiple markets because of the way that we're positioned. But certainly I wouldn't discount what they're doing.
Yeah, look, I think what T-Mobile is doing is certainly not at all innovative in design, but is innovative in the way it's being positioned. We've had subsidized and unsubsidized models in this industry since the beginning of time. Whether it's you've got contract and no contract pricing on devices, you've got prepaid and postpaid offerings, you've got different value propositions in terms of the monthly fee. The way they're positioning it, however, in their target market, I think is very innovative, and I applaud them for that. And financing phones as a replacement of subsidizing the device and essentially financing the phone via a 2-year contract with an early termination fee, it's different in positioning but not in design.
But I think what I think is actually unique, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the fact that your monthly payment is actually lower, right? Like, let's say you're going to finance the phone. You pay $20 extra a month for the phone. Then once the phone is paid off, your bill drops by $20 a month. Whereas if I'm one of your customers under a subsidized scenario, I keep paying my $70 a month,
right,
even after I've paid off the phone. So it's like, if you finance a car and you keep paying the finance charge well after you've paid for the car, it just seems like
right,
you're giving money away then.
Yeah, in our industry, we categorize that as retention expense at the end of the contract. And as we make retention offers to customers at the end of the 2 years, every day.
Right.
And so I think very similar.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's a big change in that way, but it really depends how the consumers react. I mean, if that were to go across the board as the way you did it, I would think it would be not great news for the handset manufacturers, because I think people would start to, if you already have that same cost and you're now eligible for an upgrade, a high percentage of people almost automatically start thinking about that upgrade, and they'll look at that upgrade, and so you start the cycle again. So if
it's
consumers,
interesting you bring that up, because I was actually at All Things D's Dive into Mobile earlier this week, and Terry Myerson from Microsoft was there talking and saying that Microsoft with Windows Phone is going toward these, other markets other than the U.S., so markets where there's a big unsubsidized population, and that's where people are really focused on getting value from their phones, right? Here, the phone manufacturer can charge you guys, or say they're charging retail of $650, but the consumer still only pays $200. And it just seems like it's an inflated cost, and there's no real incentive for the manufacturers to compete on price. Is that bad for you guys? I would think it would be kind of bad for you because you have to pay the inflated cost, right?
That side of the business has not necessarily evolved for a very long time, right? But it's up to the OEMs to come up with unique and innovative products and then compete with the carrier's purchase orders.
Right, but don't the subsidies cost you money? I mean,
yeah,
absolutely.
Right.
But the T-Mobile model, they're moving from they're just taking the subsidy, taking it out of one hand on the subsidy side, or putting it back to the subsidy side, but taking it away from the revenue side. The economics are still very, very similar.
It's a similar model, yeah. But it's
it doesn't affect your bottom line that much that you worry about the subsidies.
it actually it can have an improvement on it. So
To do what? To get rid of the
to
subsidy?
get rid of the subsidies, yes.
Right. So then why isn't everybody jumping to it? Doesn't everybody want to
It's
make more
because of
money?
the capital outlay up front. There's a big
okay.
capital outlay. So that's
Okay.
what the issue is.
For the consumer or for you?
For the carrier.
Oh, for the carrier.
Yeah, we have to fund the phone up front.
But to your
But
point,
you're-
Maggie,
So it's a larger, I mean,
if you
we get
remove
into
the
the-
subsidy and lower your
Yeah.
revenue, it's still cash, right?
Right.
it's kind of a combo model. I don't think they've completely
They
lowered
just
their
provide
revenue
credit.
enough to cover for the cost, so.
Yeah, I would challenge that you look at the true economics of what's going on with the customer level between a subsidized model and what T-Mobile is offering. And my off the napkin calculation is that you're not looking at a big difference in dollars to the customer.
Okay.
I'll tell you what I like most about it. It could be very galvanizing. You know, if you're T-Mobile, I mean, you're probably sweating bullets, you know, right now, because while the customer's on the hook to pay for the phone, right, they're not on the hook to keep using your service. So what it really does is it forces T-Mobile to make sure that they deliver a customer service experience that meets their customers' expectations. And that's got to be good for the industry.
Okay, all right. So another big topic about, you know, again, I focus a lot on consumers. I write this column a couple times a week, and I answer people's questions. And, you know, one of the things that had people up in arms, you know, about a month ago was this whole idea of, you know, phone unlocking, and how, you know, the Library of Congress has not exempted this from the DMCA, and now it's illegal to unlock your phone. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? You know, all the big carriers kind of chimed in and said, oh yeah, you can definitely, you know, we'll unlock your phones for you after your contract is up. And I'm just curious, for some of the smaller players, I mean, what do you all think of unlocking phones? And maybe, you know, should the phones just be unlocked when they come to you? Why do they have to be locked to a carrier?
Well, I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, but I'll give you my quick 2 cents worth on that. First of all, I don't think phones should, you know, come unlocked. I do think that as a carrier, when you sign a new customer up for service, you know, there's unique aspects of your service offering, your platforms that would require, you know, locking. To the extent the customer then is not satisfied with your service and wants to change service providers, they got to be able to do that. I think forbidding customers to unlock their devices is anti-competitive, anti-consumer. That's my view. And for any of us that have customers that sign up for a 2-year contract and then pound our fist and say, you shouldn't be able to unlock your device until your contract up, you know, we're talking from both sides of our mouth. We charge early termination fees to try to recoup the lion's share of those expenses back from the customer. So we bill the customer an ETF and then tell them they can't unlock their phone and take their device to another service provider is just wrong.
Yeah,
right. I agree. And it goes back to the technical issues that there is so much firmware built into the devices that's customized for each carrier that unlocked, the customer experience is going to be degraded in an unlocked phone, depending upon where they transport.
Although, would you say everybody who's walking around with a Nexus 4 has a degraded experience? I mean, that's an unlocked phone.
Well, for basic services, yes. But in terms of those differentiators that the carriers built in, that they've put value added on, that in many cases the customer may have bought because of those value addeds, those go away under an unlocked environment. Sure, unlock the phones. Allow the customer, I think, you know, it makes sense for the customer to be able to make those decisions. But there is a customer affecting service that occurs when you unlock the phone and you go to another carrier that doesn't support the services that are built into that phone.
Yeah. Craven, did you want to add anything?
Well, you know, you mentioned the Nexus phone, and we're getting ready to launch that phone. There is issues with unlocked devices, with software upgrades, and sometimes it doesn't work perfectly when it comes into your network. So Ron's right. There is a need to be able to have a quality customer experience on your network and on the networks it's going to run on. And that's one of the reasons that it's important for us to make sure that experience is good. So locking the device is one of the ways to have that experience controlled, and we know that, you know, the customer is going to be able to do what they need to do where they're at when they want to. And unlocked devices, as he said, do not get, you know, the same quality of service that you may get with a locked device. So there's a trade-off there.
Okay. I think this issue also goes hand in hand with interoperability, which we've sort of already touched upon, because, you know, it's sort of, it doesn't make any sense to unlock a phone if you can't actually, it doesn't work on somebody else's network, so what's the point? Mm-hmm. So, you know, kind of getting back to that issue, what do you think can be done, you know, aside from the 700 megahertz A block issue, because I think that's something that we've all talked about quite a bit and know about, but what can we do maybe in this upcoming auction to ensure that there's interoperability? And, you know, will we ever see a day when somebody can get their phone unlocked if they're unhappy with your service and go to any provider that they want, and vice versa? I don't know, Mike, you want to chime in?
I mean, I'm not sure I can think of anything special other than we've already talked about. I mean, I think I think Ron mentioned it earlier. I think when they auction new spectrum, they have to think carefully about how to avoid a balkanized situation. So it depends on the bands being auctioned and how they're being split up. So it depends on a lot of things. But I think they've seen it. There's been a lot of heat about this issue on the 700. So I think they just have to think through it very carefully in terms of the conditions. And there's precedent for that. They've done it before.
Yeah. Okay. All right. As we kind of wrap up things here, I guess what are some of the, if you look out a year from now and we're all sitting around chatting again, what are some of the issues that you'd like to see taken to Washington, or just anything in the industry that you would like to see changed in the next year, or what do you think will help you all overcome some of the challenges we talked about earlier? What can be done in the next year or so?
I think it's Steve's list.
Yeah.
What Steve put together is what's critical for us. And interoperability and handsets, I mean, those were the top two things on this list, and I think that's critical. The new chairman coming in gives us a new opportunity. And I agree with what Michael said. Steve's done a great job. Their team's done a great job getting us positioned to get our views in place and potentially have good legislation that will help us long term.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple tipping points that we need to, hopefully we'll start seeing some development on. The roaming hub, getting to true carrier-to-carrier LTE roaming capabilities. I think the announcement today with C-Spire and Sprint is a great step forward as the industry can move forward with more carriers going down that path. Again, I think that will be a significant change because, again, it flows back into as the devices become capable of more spectrum, more band classes, then the ecosystem can start developing. I think that hopefully a year from now we'll see a much healthier opportunity for the Tier 3 and Tier 2 carriers to be able to provide 4G data roaming than we have today. And I hope that an AT&T and a Verizon, T-Mobile, a Sprint all recognize the value that historically has been in the industry of partnering with Tier 2 and Tier 3 carriers.
Okay.
Well, I don't think I can talk any more about some of the issues that we've talked about here that would add any additional value. I would say that we could certainly use some help getting our economy kind of turn the rest of the way around. I think strong economy goes a long way to solve a lot of problems. And so as I think about some of the economic impacts, particularly in some of the rural communities that our companies serve, that's something that's certainly on the forefront.
Do you think there are going to be a lot fewer of you guys here at the conference next year? It seems like the industry's consolidating quite a bit.
Might be one fewer.
Next.
Smaller.
I mean, is that good? Is that good for the industry, or is that not good?
Well, I think there's some level of consolidation that will continue to happen, and I think that's the nature of an infrastructure, industry. But I know Hugh Mina, if he's here, would think I'm naive in saying this, but in terms of hopes for down the line, my hope is that more Tier 1 carriers, so AT&T and Verizon, join Sprint and T-Mobile, and Sprint and T-Mobile continue the way they're going, and realizing that the regional carriers are really as much part of the solution as competition. The old days, there was, as Ron alluded to, the size differential wasn't as big for a while, right? And everybody was scrapping, and there's the competitive juices flowing. If I'm AT&T and Verizon, I look at the total, addressable market, and I'm losing a lot more to the handset manufacturers, to the over-the-top applications. I mean, I think that's my real worry. And I would say, look, cooperate more with the industry, with the rest of the people in the industry, and think about how, we can look good for the consumer by working together. So maybe that's a pipe dream to think it's a year from now, but I do think it's in their interest to do that. And so I don't think it's out of the question that it could happen.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank the audience for listening.
You hit dead on.